All right, so are you ready to dive into some serious history today?
Always. Where are we going?
U.S.-China relations.
Yeah. Juicy.
Yeah, your source, this BBC Chinese article, chuts this whole roller coaster ride
Hmm.
from cautious handshakes back in '72 to, well, let's just say things are looking a tad frostier now.
Yeah, what's fascinating is how quickly we went from like Nixon meets Mao being front page news
Right.
to talk of a new Cold War.
Yeah, how did we get here? That's the million-dollar question. I mean,
The big one.
Nixon's 1972 visit, that was monumental.
Huge.
After decades of, like, practically ignoring each other,
Right.
this is this huge gesture towards engagement.
Hmm.
And your article even mentions Deng Xiaoping,
Oh,
who would
wow.
later lead China, rocking
Yeah.
a 10-gallon hat in Texas.
I love that image.
You get the sense that both sides were, like, genuinely hopeful.
Yeah, there was a feeling in the air for sure.
Yeah.
It wasn't just symbolism, though.
Okay.
This was a strategic tango, too.
Okay, how so?
Well, the U.S. saw a chance to maybe, possibly, nudge China towards, a more democratic path.
Okay.
And China, just starting its economic reforms, they saw a golden ticket to Western markets
Mm-hmm.
and investment.
Right.
Plus, let's not forget, they weren't exactly best buds with the Soviet Union at the time.
That's true.
So aligning with the U.S. made sense on multiple levels.
Okay, so a win-win on paper,
Right.
but how did that actually play out in reality?
So for a good while, it really did seem like a win-win,
Really?
especially as we hit the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yep.
China's economy is booming, which is great for American businesses,
Mm,
and access to the U.S. market, that helps fuel that growth.
right.
Remember when China joined the World Trade Organization in '01?
Yeah, that was a big deal.
Huge EE deal.
Mm.
Felt like proof that economic interdependence could lead to, a more open China.
You can see why people back then might think, hey, this is working.
Right.
But I'm guessing it wasn't all smooth sailing.
Exactly, because woven into this whole narrative of progress,
Yeah.
you have these moments that just expose the inherent complexity of the relationship.
Like what?
Well, take the Tiananmen Square protests in '89.
Right.
Suddenly, the West has this huge dilemma. Prioritize human rights
Mm-hmm.
or maintain those economic ties.
That's a tough one.
It was a big deal.
Yeah.
And I imagine it cast a long shadow, even as things on the surface seemed to improve economically.
Absolutely. I mean, how could it not?
Yeah, Tiananmen was this stark reminder that economic engagement didn't automatically equal political reform in China.
Right.
And this tension, this balancing act between values and interests.
Yeah.
Well, it's a theme that continues to this day.
To this day.
Absolutely.
It feels like things start to really shift in your article around 2008.
Oh, yeah. What happens?
Well, it's interesting because on the surface, you have the Beijing Olympics,
Right.
China's big moment on the world stage.
Highly orchestrated coming out party for sure.
Yeah.
But, and this is where your article gets really insightful, I think
Yeah.
2008 was also the year the U.S. found itself in a major financial crisis.
Oh, right.
So suddenly this image of China's rise coincides with America's own vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
It shifted perceptions, even if just subconsciously,
Mm.
about where power might be heading.
And I'm guessing not everyone was thrilled about that shift.
You think?
Yeah.
You're telling me. Some saw it as a threat, and this is where things get even more, complicated.
Yeah.
Your article points to Xi Jinping's rise to power
Mm-hmm.
in 2012 as a major turning point.
Okay.
Internally, China sees a consolidation of power, a crackdown on dissent, and this whole idea of a China model of development starts to take hold.
Okay, hold on. China model? For
Mhm.
those of us who haven't added that to our fridge magnets yet, what does that even mean?
Basically, it's this idea that China's authoritarian system,
Mm.
with its tight control over information and emphasis on economic growth above all else,
Right.
might actually be a more effective path to prosperity
Mm.
than,
Sorry.
Western-style democracy. At least that's the argument.
Which, let's be honest, probably didn't sit well with a lot of folks in the West
No.
who were hoping, economic liberalization would lead to, well, more freedom generally.
Right,
Yeah.
to put it mildly. And it's not like these internal shifts were happening in a vacuum or anything.
Right.
China is simultaneously becoming this major player on the global stage.
Yeah.
Your article highlights things like the Belt and Road Initiative,
Oh, yeah.
these massive infrastructure projects spanning continents.
Right. And while those are officially about economic development,
Right.
I remember even back then there was this undercurrent of,
Mm-hmm.
is this China's play for global dominance.
Absolutely. Perception is everything in international relations, right?
Yeah.
And for some in the West, the optics weren't great.
Yeah.
It fed into this whole narrative of a more assertive, even aggressive China
Yeah. Right.
challenging the, established world order.
And it's not just about, like, the big picture stuff, like the Belt and Road, right? I remember a lot of tension around things like China's trade practices.
Yes.
Its military activity in the South China Sea.
Right, you're hitting on a key point here.
Yeah.
Because alongside this idea of a rising China, you have these very specific actions that were seen as, shall we say, not playing by the rules
Right.
that the U.S. and its allies had,
Established.
thank you, after World War II.
Right.
So you have this clash of visions,
Mhm.
this sense that China isn't just playing the game.
Yeah.
It wants to, rewrite the rules altogether.
And then enter stage, right? Donald Trump, 2017.
Oh, boy.
I think everyone knows this part of the story gets
Oh.
interesting.
Interesting might be an understatement.
Yeah.
This piece doesn't mince words, calling the Trump era a period of rapid deterioration in U.S.-China relations.
Oh.
And honestly, it's hard to argue with that assessment.
No, it's not.
It really isn't.
The trade war, the pandemic, tensions over Hong Kong.
It felt like every other week there was a new headline pushing these two sides further apart.
Yeah, and it wasn't just policy disagreements, although those were certainly there.
Right.
There was this deliberate framing of the relationship as like a zero-sum game.
Okay.
Like, for America to win, China has to lose.
Right.
That kind of rhetoric makes finding common ground incredibly difficult.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
No.
They're like, everyone put on these rivalry goggles.
Right.
And suddenly everything was seen through that lens.
Totally.
Your article mentions some really concrete examples of, this downward spiral.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Consulates being closed, sanctions flying back and forth.
Exactly. And these weren't just symbolic gestures. They
Yeah.
had real consequences. Businesses were impacted.
Right.
Diplomatic channels, severed.
Yeah.
This deepening mistrust that just seeps into every aspect of the relationship.
So by the end of the Trump era, we've gone from ping-pong diplomacy and cowboy hats
Yes.
to...
Well, what? Is this the new Cold War everyone's talking about?
Yeah.
So by the end of the Trump era, we've gone from ping-pong diplomacy and cowboy hats to, well, what? Is this the new Cold War everyone keeps talking about?
It's the big question your article leaves us with, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's a tough one, honestly. I wouldn't say we're in a full-blown Cold War just yet,
Okay.
but the parallels are definitely there.
Yeah.
The sense of ideological competition, the economic rivalry, the whole military posturing thing,
Right.
all those ingredients are in the mix.
But it's not like the U.S. and China have completely stopped talking, right? I mean, there have to be some areas where they can at least, I don't know, cooperate,
Right.
find things they both agree on.
You'd hope so.
Yeah.
And your article points out, to be fair,
Okay.
that the rhetoric has cooled down a bit since, those peak Trump years.
Okay.
But those underlying tensions, those haven't gone anywhere. It's like they're
Right.
stuck in this cycle of mistrust.
Okay.
One side makes a move,
Mm-hmm.
the other side sees it as a provocation. And then, boom, you get this escalation that's just, it's so hard to break free from.
So where do we even go from here? Because if this deep dive has taught me anything, it's that, trying to predict the future of U.S.-China relations.
Good luck.
Yeah, it's a fool's errand. But seriously, what are the options? Are we just doomed to this path of conflict?
Doomed. Oh, I wouldn't go that far.
Okay.
But your question, it really highlights the challenge here.
Okay.
How do you go from a relationship that's basically defined by suspicion
Mm-hmm.
to one that allows for, if not, friendship,
Right.
at least some level of pragmatic coexistence?
Because ignoring each other isn't really an option, is it? I mean, these are the two biggest economies in the world, both nuclear powers.
Right. What happens between them impacts all of us.
Exactly. And that's what makes this relationship so, I don't know, compelling, but also kind of scary, It'd be easy to fall into despair and be like, well, another Cold War, that's inevitable.
Right.
But that ignores the agency we still have and the choices that both sides can make.
100%.
So what you're saying is it's not about whether the U.S. and China can go back to how things were because, I mean, let's be real, that ship has sailed.
It's gone.
It's about finding a new way forward.
Exactly. And that's the real question your article leaves us with.
Which is...
It's not about, erasing the past 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's about actually learning from them.
Yeah.
What worked, what clearly did not work, and how can we apply those lessons, to build a future where even with all the differences,
Yeah.
the U.S. and China can at least coexist
Yeah.
without constantly teetering on the brink of disaster?
It's a big question.
It's a question worth asking yourself,
Yeah.
honestly, because the answer, whatever it may be,
Yeah.
it's going to shape the world we all live in.
Talk about a thought-provoking deep dive. I think I need to, go find a quiet corner and process all of this.
Right. It's a lot.
Thanks for taking us on this journey.
Of course, happy to be here.
It's been eye-opening, to say the least.
Glad to hear it.